Welcome to the fourth day of the challenge. Today we will continue working on our project. We'll take a look on how to install packages and add some HTML forms. So we will build our search flight page where you can actually search for flights. We will need to use some icons, right? Something like a plane icon, for example. If we want to do that, we will have to install an additional library, which is offering us really a lot of icons. That library is called Font Awesome. We will get to that in a second. In an earlier video, I told you that Angular is using Node, and Node is offering the NPM, the Node Package Manager, which is just like the NuGet packages that we have in Visual Studio, but for JavaScript. You can search and find different packages from the npm.js website. And if you want to install a package, you simply go to the client app folder, open the command line, and then we run a command, which you can see here, npm install, and then add the package name that we can find at npmjs.com. If you want to learn how to use the up-to-date version of other npm CLI comments, go to docs.npmjs.com/CLI/comments. So npm is offering us a complete CLI console line interface where we can run different comments. So in our case, for example, we can install the Font Awesome package like this. npm install add Font Awesome /Font Awesome -free. This is how the package name looks like. Alright, now let's switch over to our project and directly add this package to our project. Alright, welcome to this video. So this is the page I'm talking about. This is npm.js, npm Node Package Manager. Let's search for a library called Font Awesome -free. There we go. The iconic font, CSS and SVG framework. Let's go ahead and search. We can simply click on that link here directly. And on the right side, you can see install npm I add Font Awesome /Font Awesome -free. Let's go ahead and copy that. Now on the client app folder, right click, open in terminal, so that we are directly in the correct folder inside of that terminal. And after initializing, which takes just a couple of seconds, we are able to run comments. So let's go ahead and simply paste the comment we have just copied. Hit enter so that it's getting installed. And now the package is installed. So we have added it and now we need to apply it to our Angular project. So go ahead and open up client app folder. And on the right side, you can see Angular JSON file. Double click on that to open it up. Let me zoom in a little bit here. And now scroll a little bit down here under root architect. You can see the assets folder. And here you can see styles, right? And this is where you can already see it. Here's Bootstrap referenced. We can here also add our new, Font Awesome free styling sheet. So let's go ahead and do that. If we install a Node package, it will be in a folder called node_modules /add Font Awesome /Font Awesome -free /CSS /all.css. And you can find that Node modules folder in your project structure. So there you can find the final path to that file. Alright, we will come to that Angular JSON file just in a second. I got some presentation sheets for you to explain what's happening here. And now we have referenced our Font Awesome or Font Awesome package, which is a styling sheet directly here in our Angular JSON. And now we can make use of it in our project. Alright, that's it already with this video. Let's move forward to the next part. Welcome to this video. In the client app folder of our Angular project, there is an Angular JSON file which you have just seen in the last video. This file is intended to configure the Angular CLI. For example, you can specify differences between your development version, your production version, and for example, also your alpha and beta version. And in the last video, you have seen how you can apply new CSS styles to the entire application, including all of its components. Alright, so this is just an addition to the last video to tell you that you can use that Angular JSON file to configure your builds and serving. Welcome to this video. We have created our search flights component already. And here I just started the application and you can see search flights work. Now we should display some fake data here. Now we should modify that page, add a form where people can search for flights, but right now we don't have a backend. So we cannot really grab any real data. We should now go ahead into our component TypeScript class and create some fake data so that when we in the end send a form to search for flights, we will get some fake data delivered. Let's do that right now. Simply switch over to our project, and on the right side, open the client app folder, source folder, app folder, search flights folder, and inside there, open the search flights component.ts. Now let's go ahead and add a simple field here. So below the constructor or above the constructor, depending on your coding style, let's go ahead and add search result of type any, which is an array of strings. So let's go ahead and add some simple strings like airlines here. So American Airlines. Second one could be British Airways. And maybe even a German one. Lufthansa. There we go. All right, so let's save it. Keep in mind that we now have a field here, which is called search flights, which is an array of strings inside of our search flight component. Now let's switch back to the template. And now the template is the search flights component HTML. So in exactly the same folder, switch to the HTML file. Now here you can see what we can see in the front end of our project right now. Search flight works. Now let's switch that code over to, instead of render that paragraph here, render all the information that we have right here using a Angular for loop. We can keep that paragraph but adjust it a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that. Search flights, for example. Now let's write our loop. We create a new div and we configure that for loop inside of the first div tag, so the opening HTML tag. Let's do that. We are using an asterisk for this. So asterisk, which is that symbol here. And then we say ng for Angular for, ng4 equals to, and now we can write the statement or the loop. So let flight of search result, right? And search result is that one here. So if we're talking about a for each loop in that scenario, when we compare it to C#, then flight here, let flight would be string flight in search results. So let flight would be one of those three, right? Default iteration loop. So let flight of search results, and we can access flight, which will then be each of those elements inside of the array, right? Okay, let's go ahead. We use double curly braces for this to add data binding flight. Now we access flight here from inside of our loop. So I guess you already got the point. Let's save it like this and reload or start our application. And now you can see that we got that paragraph search flights right here. And here we got the list rendered by our ng for loop from our TypeScript array. Awesome. So now you have created some TypeScript code and we used an Angular loop to render some content. Now let's go ahead and add the very first form to our project, which is the search header, where you can search for flights. So this is like displaying some flights or some flight information, however, just in a pretty short way. Now let's go ahead and write the very first form. So see you in the next video. Welcome to this video. We will now create a form for searching flights. So let's go to the search flights component HTML file, and here we got our loop from the last video, and now we need to modify all of this a little bit. So let me add some space between this because we will not touch that loop in this video. Let's get started. Most of the stuff which is coming now is, well, HTML input fields and labels, for example, and we will also add some Bootstrap styling to it. So I will explain that styling a little bit to give you an idea of what Bootstrap can do, but I will not get too much into detail because it's a huge topic and this course is not about styling, right? So definitely go ahead and check out the Bootstrap documentation because it's pretty straightforward. And if you want to build something, go there, visit the documentation and check for that styling classes you want to use, right? Because you can simply right click and then check on which Bootstrap classes are used in your reference on that documentation, for example. So let's go ahead. Instead of that search flights paragraph here, we should first of all add a nice headline or heading. We use h5 tag for this. And also, just want to mention that you can check out the GitHub repository and copy the code instead if you don't want to follow along. I always suggest you to follow along because coding practice is better than simply copy paste. But for sure, if you get tired of writing some HTML code and you just want to proceed a little bit faster, go ahead and copy that, but pay attention on copy paste mistakes, right? So you know that. Go ahead, write the code on your own. That would be the best practice. Simply follow along with me. Let's go. We got that H5 here. And first of all, we add some Bootstrap classes here to make it look, well, a little bit better when it comes to spacing and positioning. So we first add a class called text md-center, and then we add some margin here, margin -5. Let's call it search for flights. There we go. So now we have a nicer headline. Let's take a look. As you can see, when you simply update or refresh the page, we now have a centered headline here. Let's switch back. So when it comes to responsive design in Bootstrap, we should always pay attention on, well, margin, spacing and all of that positioning stuff. But Bootstrap always provides us some help. So Bootstrap itself is using a grid internally and, well, we can make use of it too, and we should definitely. So that said, we will now start creating our form. Normally, we would go ahead and say, hey, we create a form like this, but we don't have a backend yet, so we don't have a position or like an API where we could potentially connect that form to. So later on, when we combine everything together, we will come back here and add that form tag to configure it and connect everything. For now, we will keep it, because we don't have a backend, we will keep it simply inside of a div. So let's go ahead and write a div here. This will be our main wrapper for this form. Here we add a class, and the class is margin5, right? And we use a grid system here with some space in between, so gap 3. Now, Bootstrap uses rows and columns, just like default table structure, right? So in our first row, we will create one here, class equals to row. We will have 2 input fields. So in each row, we will have 2 columns, and each column will contain an input field. Let's go ahead and build a main structure, div class column. And we will simply copy that so that we have it twice. 1 row with 2 columns. Now inside that column, we will create another div, which is holding the input field and the label. So we also want to show a label so that the user can see some nice text information. Class of that class of that div, form -floating. This is adding a very nice visual effect. I will show that to you later on once we're done here with that HTML stuff. Now we create the input field inside here. Input, and we can add a placeholder here. For example, from. Let's write it in capital letter, from, and a nice class for styling, which is form -control. So this is the class or Bootstrap class for styling input fields. Now go ahead and create a label, add some classes. Classes equals to text -primary, which will adjust the text color, and make it a form label so that it's nicely attached to that input here. Here we can also say from. Now let's take that div, which I've highlighted here, including the form floating, copy it and paste it inside of the column below. Now adjust the text, because this one here is our to, or let's call it destination. And also here, right? So now we got those 2 input fields, 1 row, 2 columns, and each column has 1 small input field, right? And an attached label. Let's save it and let's take a look right now. Okay, here you can see our, well, 2 input fields. Once we click there, you can see that nice floating effect, right? That label, how it's floating. This is what that floating form is doing. And for sure, we can add something here. Let's say Berlin, and then we can go, for example, to Madrid, right? Okay, so it's not doing pretty much right now, but we are making progress when it comes to styling. Now let's move on, because we need to add 2 more informations, from date and to date. Afterwards, we will also add a number of passengers, so how many people want to fly, like 1 person or 3 passengers, and then we need a submit button. Let's switch back to the project. Instead of doing everything again now, let's simply copy the entire row. Make sure to grab the correct element, row. Let's copy it here and paste it again. I will zoom out a little bit now. This one will be for date. So here we got from and destination, and here we will change it from date and to date. So let's go ahead and do that. From date and to date and to date. Now we need to make another adjustment, because those input fields here are not type of string, they are type of date. So let's go ahead and use an attribute, which is called type equals to date. Now copy that and paste it in the second input below for the toDate input field. Let's save it and take a look again. Okay, as you can see, we now have a from date and the toDate like this. And once you click on that calendar icon, you can see a date picker popping up. That's pretty cool, right? Now, one more time, we will again create a new row. So go ahead and simply create a new div, assign a class, which is row. And inside here, we again have two columns, class equals to call, simply copy it over. And there we go. Now you will see the result in the end. Let's go ahead and to that column here, add text minus end. Sorry, there we go, text minus end. And now let's add a label here. And that one is saying number of passengers. There we go. And we will add some classes to it for sure. Text is form minus label. Text minus primary, sorry, need to write that inside of the braces, inside of the quotes, text primary, and margin top -2. So let me just make a line break here. There we go. So those classes I've just added, form label, text minus primary, and margin top 2. And now switch back to the other column, which is here. And here we will now add a div with the class input minus group, because we will now build a little bit more complex structure. Here we simply got an input field, but now we want to style it a little bit different, right? We have that number of passengers and you can say 4, and then you can write something, and then afterwards it's saying passengers, and then we have another button. So you will see that in the end just in a minute. We are nearly done. Let's create a simple text. We can use a div for that. Class form input minus group and then minus text. That one is saying 4. And then we have another input class is equals to form minus control. That's the default one. We will always use that for inputs. The type here is number, and the placeholder is, for example, 1. Now afterwards we will add another text, just as I said. Class will again be input minus group minus text, and that one will say passengers. Now to wrap it up and finish all of this, we will simply add a button, which is then, well, for submitting the form. So a form always has a submit button to send the information and receive some data in return, for example. Let's go ahead, add a button. And it's very important, not really important right now, but important for later, that we make it type of submit, because the button of type submit submits the form. Right now we are not using a form, because we have everything wrapped inside of a div instead of a form, but later on we will adjust it, and then we will need that type submit right here. So let's configure it right now. Also we add some styling, button and button minus primary, or button minus primary and button. That way is also fine. And then we go ahead and now we use an icon, and that's why we used our Font Awesome node package. So then we have a class, fas, then Font Awesome minus search. So we'll get a nice search icon, and yeah, that's it already. Now we can close the button and we are done. Let's go ahead, save, and take a look. All right, now you can see we have that number of passengers here, 4, and this is why we adjusted the styling a little bit to make it look exactly like this, right? So compare it to your HTML code and you will see how it happened that we got that form right here, because we made use of that input group. This is why we used that class, that Bootstrap class, to make it look like this. But as I said, go ahead, check the Bootstrap documentation. It's really straightforward. And now we got that small arrows here to increase or decrease the number, or we can for sure simply add some value by using the keyboard, right? We also have that button here. We can click on it, but it's not doing anything right now. Alright, so our search flight form, let's call it like this, has now some nice styling and some information that we can already enter. So this is a huge step forward. And since this is not only a backend course about ASP.NET Core, but instead is also an Angular front-end course, we will have to take a look at how to build forms, how to style them, etc., so that you are really in the end job ready. Now, you should know that here on that page we will build the most HTML. So once this is done, you have most of the HTML already completed. I know that it's not the most interesting part, right? But it's definitely part of your future job. Go ahead, pay attention, and writing HTML is easy. So this is the easy part, enjoy it. Go ahead, try some things, maybe adjust the styling or simply follow along. You can even go ahead and copy the source code, right? So it's necessary that we build it because in the end we want to have an application that looks nice. And now in the next video we will take a look on how we can use this fake data here, extend it into, well, TypeScript interfaces so that we create one for our flights and then uses instead of simple strings. And then afterwards we will again create some HTML to render all of this in a very good way. Welcome to this video. Right now for our flights we simply use strings, but that's not the information that we really want to have once we search for flights, right? There is more information than only the name of the flight company. So now we will create a more complex object instead of a string, and we use interfaces for this. Interfaces are used as abstractions. They act like contracts that specify which methods and properties should a data type have. So here, for example, we have that interface and the name is time, place, read model. So place, type string, time, also type string, right? And all of this is just like a C# class. But there is a difference between C# interfaces and TypeScript interfaces, because in C# interfaces you always need that implicit implementation, but here you can simply use it like a simple C# class. Great. So you can implement TypeScript interfaces like this. You can see it right here. It's a regular class we've discussed earlier, for example, but it implements the time, place, read model. So this class here needs to have place and time property because it implements the interface, and the interface also has place and time. So the class which implements the interface needs those fields also, or properties. We can simply create a new instance of the interface implementation, like with any other type, right? We got that var name type of time, place, read model equals to new time, place. So we got that time, place model here, and we're creating a simple class which implements that model. Now you might be asking, why are we using an interface anyway? We could simply go ahead with a simple TypeScript class, right? So later on in a couple of days, we'll make use of a tool called Open or ng Open API Gen, which is simply calling our REST API, which we'll create in ASP.NET Core, and then checks which data do I get in return. So what information do I get about a single flight, for example, and that Angular tool then takes the information and builds interfaces depending on it. And we could potentially change it to be classes, but that's a lot of work and we don't need that, since interfaces are a better programming pattern, or well, a better programming behavior anyway. So later on you will see that the Open API Gen will create those interfaces for us. This is why I'm here explaining interfaces to you. And once you have that instance of the time, place object created, you can simply go ahead and set its properties just like this right here. So as I earlier said, we don't need that implicit implementation of the interface. We can directly assign an anonymous object to the interface. So TypeScript automatically checks for the assigned object to see if it has the properties which are expected by the interface. And if it doesn't, the compiler immediately shows the errors, right? So here we go, simply ahead, create that object, time, place, rm, assign its values, and then our variable x is of type time, place. So on the left side, you could see it, how you would use it in C#, right? You would have a class which implements an interface, but on the right side, you can see that we don't need that implicit implementation. We can simply go ahead and create a simple instance of it like this. Okay, let's build our interface for the flights and then create the HTML markup. Hey, and welcome to this video. Let's go ahead and create an interface so that our flight information is more detailed. Go ahead into our search flights component.ts into the TypeScript where we have our search results right here. Now below that class here, which ends right here, we go ahead and add our interface. Export interface. Let's call it flight read model rm. This is just a convention, and we directly add another interface, export interface time place. So this is also time place rm. This is for like time and where, so date and place. So this is like place and time information combined. Inside of that time place reach model, we will now add a place of type string, and we will add a time also of type string, because they both come in string format for sure. Now inside of our flight rate model, we're gonna say airline also type string, arrival, this is time place rm. I think you get the point, right? So our arrival is bound to a time and to a place. So this is why we created that second interface. Now departure is exactly the same. We also have a time place here. There we go. RM. We got a price, also comes in string format. And we got remaining number of seats. So each flight has a specific amount of seats available. And we get that information too later on. So let's go ahead and add it. Remaining number of seats, type number this time. So instead of float, integer or whatever in TypeScript, we have number. Let's save it. Now we have our interfaces set up. This is how our data will come in. However, later on when we use that Angular plugin Open API Gen, it will automatically get created, but you definitely need to see how you can do it manually. Now, this is our search result data right now. Let's go ahead and change it, but this time I will not do it directly here. I will simply copy paste it. Just a second. There we go. Now let me replace it here. Let's take a look. So search result, still the same name, of type flight rm array, and then we have that array, and inside we have one single object here. So now you can go ahead and write down that airline, American Airlines, or you can go into the source code and copy that search result array here. So you can just go to the correct commit, which is day 4, go into the search flights component.ts and copy that element and just paste it. So here we got the airline, remaining number of seats, we got departure, which is an object, which is our interface here, time place rm, right? This is what you've learned in the presentation. We can instantiate, or we can create an object like this, and we got the time and place properties set here. So finally we have 3 possible flights, or 3 information about flights. This is our fake data right now. Great. Now that we have that, let's click on save and let's take a look at our application. As you can see, we now have still 3 elements here, but they are more complex typed objects. So this is why we see object, because it's not a single value, because it's an object which has multiple properties and we need to define which one we want to display. So our next step now is to go ahead into our HTML file again, so in our template, and take care about how this information is getting rendered. And for this we will need to create some additional HTML markup, and afterwards we have completed our first page, and you will also have learned how you can data bind those specific properties. Alright, welcome to this video. You have just created those search result information here. Now let's go ahead and render it really in a nice way. I will just close that window here so that we have some more space, and I'm inside the search flight component HTML. And here we got our form for searching flights, and here you can see we have shifted that below the list of our flight search results, right? So we will now continue working on that. So we can leave the loop right here, the ng-for loop, but we will now remove the flight here and extend it, or write it in a different way and a little bit more extended so that it really looks nice. So first of all, we will render each flight information inside of a so-called styling element card. So we go ahead and add a class which is called card. The text is dark and it has some styling, margin top to 5, and we center the text. Inside of that card, we can add 3 elements. We can add a card header, a card body, and a card footer. For now, we simply go ahead and only add a card body. So create another div, call it class card minus body. Now inside of that card body, we create a card title. For this, we use a heading 6 to create a small one. Class card minus title. Again, you can go into the GitHub repository, day 4, check for that HTML, copy that part if you like, or follow along with me, or maybe just don't write the code, simply watch me coding and then finally copy it over just as you like. We have really a lot of options, so pick the one which suits for you in the best way. By default, you have the best learning experience when you completely follow along. So the card title, we want to bind it to the airline Let's use our double curly braces to make data binding, attach it to the flight, to the property airline. Now let's take a look. Let's save it and open the application. As you can see, we now have that nice looking cards, and inside of that cards we have a headline. So this is how it looks right now. We will for sure now extend it even further. Below that H6 we add another card title. This time we write it as a div, class equals to card minus title, and we set another color, style equals to color colon, and then I have chosen a color FF3939. Great. All right, so this one here is for the remaining seats. So let's bind it, flight dot remaining number of seats, and then afterwards remaining seats. So if we have 10 remaining seats, this one will be replaced with 10 and then 10 remaining seats. Let me just correct that here. Remaining, there we go, remaining seats. All right, great. Let's take a look again. As you can see, we now have those remaining seats in color red or in a reddish color. You can for sure also go ahead and say color red, but we have that color, well, code here. Now we have some more information like departure, price, booking, etc. Let me just give you a quick preview. Here you can see the final result. So we have American Airlines, we have that remaining seats, we have the departure and the arrival here. And we also have that nice styling element, the price and the book button. So this is what we will build just so that you know how it will look in the end. So let's proceed from here. After the remaining seats div, simply still inside the card body, we add another div. And this div is our grid. So let's go ahead and add that class, the grid, text minus center and gap minus 2. Inside of that grid, we have a row, so class row. Inside of that row, we have a col, class column or col. And inside of that col, we split it up into 4 more cols. So let's go ahead and do that. Div class column. We do that 4 times. So the first one that we have right here has margin 3 to add some space. Then we have an icon, and that icon uses classes text minus primary for setting a color. Then we use font awesome, plain departure, and we set the size by using the style attribute. Style equals to font minus size of 20 pixels, for example. This is exactly how it will look like. This is for the first column. Now the second column also has an icon. This time it uses class fa minus solid, fa minus location minus dot, and we bind it to our flight dot departure place. There we go. So flight departure place. Now let's move to the next column. Here we have some margin 2. Again, we have an icon, class fa minus regular, and outside of that icon, not inside, we have flight dot departure dot time. Let's save it and let's take a look on our application. All right, so it already looks pretty nice. We have that icon, we have that place, and we have that weird looking time, and we need to adjust that a little bit. And for this we will use an Angular pipe. So let's switch back to our project. Here you can see flight departure time, and this comes in an, well, unnatural way as we have just seen. So we can use a pipe simply that way. Now it's not an OR operator, so make sure that you only use that symbol once. This is the so-called pipe, and we pipe it to date. Let's take a look again. As you can see, we now have a nice date string. Let's move on with the next column. This time I will copy what we have just done in the previous column. Let me just add it here. FA regular and then FA clock. We bind it to flight departure time, but this time date, we add some more value here, short times. Let's go, let's save it, let's take a look again. Great, you can see short time pipe has now added the time right here. Now we can proceed and add that nice middle field of that card, like the nice line and the price. Let's go ahead and add another class inside of a div, or let's add a new div and add a class. Again, we have a column, we have a lot of columns here, right? And inside there is a new div, and we have that style assigned to it, display flex. And inside that div, we have an icon, and that icon has a class fa solid and fi minus circle, and the style equals to margin minus top 50 pixels, for example, and font size of 9. I really need to say that this course is not about design, right? So normally saying something like 50 pixels or 9 pixels or whatever might be a little bit outdated, because nowadays you could use something more relative like percentages or rem, and we could have also created like a complete style sheet only for that, but we decided to go really in a very straightforward direction and simply add, well, we don't have a lot of styling in general or custom styling, but those things that we have, we decided to really add it in the most easiest way possible, because you don't want to spend too much time on figuring out how to position elements, etc. So here we have that icon. Now let's go ahead and add an HR, which is like a very thin dividing line, and we need to adjust it a little bit so that it looks nicer and really fitting to our desired look. So let's go ahead and add display block width is 100% and margin minus top is 55 pixels. There we go. Now finally we need to add another icon class far minus plane. There we got the plane icon again. Style margin minus top 48 pixels. You can for sure adjust it if you like. Let's save it like this, and then we got that closing div right here. So let's take a look at the application. Can you see that line here with the dot and the plane? This is really nice. I mean, in the end it could have been a simple graphic created with Photoshop or whatever, but we made it completely out of 3 different HTML elements and combined them together using some additional styling. So yeah, that's from my side of view, it's pretty cool. Now let's add the price. So inside of that same column, we create another icon, and that icon is using class fa minus USD for $, and we bind that to flight.price. Now let's take a look, let's save it. And you can see we got that nice looking icon here, that $. Great, afterwards we will make a line break. So we add a simple BR tag, and then we add an A tag because we will now create a button. We can also create a button with an A tag. Let's go ahead, class BTN and BTN minus secondary to make it look gray. And this is a huge button, so BTN minus LG for large, and then some margin top so that we have some more top spacing. Then we create an icon inside of that button, class fas fa minus ticket. And after that icon inside of the A tag, we say book. Now we have a book button. Let's take a look. There we go, very nice. Okay, we have that one direction, we have the departure. Now we need to add the arrival. And for this, we can simply proceed here a little bit faster. Let's go up from that line 86 here, where I got that column M-3. Let me just copy that, including all of the flight departure information up to the short time one. Let's copy it and let's paste it here under a book, but still under a book and outside of that div here. So right below, I will paste it. Let's take a look. It's configured for departure, so we need to adjust it. And before we paste in the code, we add another div. And here we have a class col. And now inside of that column, let's paste the information. Now let's adjust it to be not departure, but arrival. So just change the information from departure to arrival. And also in the icon here, FA plane, not departure, but arrival too, right? So that's pretty nice. Let's take a look at the application. Okay, as you can see, we now have all the information that we need. We have the departure, we have that nice, well, flight line here, we have the price, and we have the arrival. But we need to adjust the styling a little bit more so that everything is inside of one row. All right, so what we do is we scroll to the top, and here we have that row. And that row should have 3 columns. One for the departure, one for the part in the middle with the price, and then we have the one for arrival. Right now we can see that we have all inside of that column. We need to adjust that, so open it up. And now here we got the departure. And here you can see that first div class call which is rendering the price and all of the information here. So start copying from here up to the very bottom where we got that flight arrival time, short time, and then the next div. Let's copy it, close it, and let's see when we close the call here after the row directly and paste in the information here. Let's save it. So I just closed it, and after that one I had it opened. It will look like this. We have one row with 3 calls. This is how it will be arranged in the correct way. So let's take a look at the application. As I said, that one is the information of departure. This is price information and the nice style elements, and this is arrival. Let's see what happens. Great, now we have our desired style achieved. That looks very nice. What I want to do is to go ahead and change the background color of the card, and then we are finished. So in the card body, go ahead and add a style equals to padding 20 pixel, so that we have some more padding, and a background minus color, so that we change it to be like what we have here is E5 EC F26E, right? So please go ahead and feel free to add whatever background color you would like to have. Now let's take a final look. Great, as you can see, this looks a little bit more professional because it now differs from the rest of the entire application. Awesome, so now we have completed the styling of our search flights page. We can search for flights here using that form later on, and we have a display of those flights we have found in a very nice way. So yeah, I know those videos are not the most exciting one, but as I said, you need to see, or at least you need to code to make applications that also look nice. And building HTML is never exciting, right? It's never really exciting. And the only part that was exciting here is really the data binding stuff, right? So that you see how the data is bound, and also that we can use those Angular pipes to, well, change the format of specific elements, but in the end, building HTML markup is not very exciting at all. However, you need to see how it's getting done so that you know how you can do it. And I guess you know that you should really take a look at Bootstrap later on after that course to see how easy it is to use Bootstrap to build very nice applications, because we can only give you a brief introduction into Bootstrap styling here. Alright, so let me tell you, this was definitely the most or the hugest part of HTML markup in this course. So you have done really a lot of HTML now, and we will not do so much more, right? What we will do is we will add validation later on, form validation, because that's very important. You need that skill as a front end or back end or full stack developer. So we will take a look on how we can use Angular for form validation. Great, I hope you had a lot of fun today, and we will see us tomorrow in the next videos.